Hello and welcome to Talking About My Generation. I'm Herb Ricardo here with Alicia Vassar and Rich Grego. And today we're going to talk about ambition. But before we get started, I'm just going to let everybody know that I am in a cafe slash bookstore slash art gallery. And you're going to hear some people in the background and they're going to be laughing because I'm in Helsinki, Finland, the happiest place on the planet. So I'll be here for the next 4 days, checking out the place and everything else. And so I'll also give a report to all once I immerse myself in the culture and talk to some people and see what's going on. But anyway, I'm really excited and happy to be with my two great friends over here and talking about ambition and what is ambition? How do we define ambition? Is it different for different people? Are we looking at nature versus nurture? Are we born with ambition, or is it something that we learn? Is it a combination of both? So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about ambition. And I think probably, again, I think we'll start with Alicia and talk a little bit about what ambition means to you, or how do you see ambition?
So I definitely the nurture versus nature thing. I think it's like most things, it's a little bit of both. But when I was thinking about it for myself, I was like, okay, first, what is my ambition? And then putting that out, like you don't realize it, but most of the time when you're walking through life, you don't really think about what your overarching ambition, or maybe for me, it took me a second to be like, okay, what is it that I want? So I ended up coming up with this. I want to be a force for good, someone who uses whatever platform, skills, or relationships I have to make a meaningful difference, whether through business, mentorship, advocacy, or simply showing up for others. I want my life work to reflect care, accountability, and a genuine desire to see people and places thrive. Um, and when I ended up writing it out and stuff, I thought that this doesn't seem like a very common, I guess, ambition, but I did feel like it reflected something about younger people. But going back to nurture or nature, for me, I think my ambition was very much nurtured through the uh, people around me, always being super supportive, especially taking an interest in the things that interest me, always listening to me spouting on about my interests and things. Um, but also the readings that I took in, because I was thinking about what kind of influenced this. And I think the caring and loving aspects, it reminded me a lot of the works that I read from Bell Hooks, um, James Baldwin. And then recently I've been reading Kwame Ture, a revolutionary activist, and he was talking about making a difference, material difference for people and change. So I think for a lot of people, those factors kind of are big on shaping their ambition. How about for either of you?
Before I go ahead and get Rich in here, I just want to respond a little bit to what you had to say. It seems like a lot of your thought about ambition is about what you can give, how you can
Yes.
design and develop yourself, on how you can give to others, where often ambition is thought about someone trying to achieve for themselves.
Hmm.
And I'll go ahead and I'll pass this on to Rich. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, I know I'm always raising this issue and we keep talking about it, but again, kind of in uh, direct succession to our last few discussions, right? I mean, along with different cultural conceptions of what happiness is or should be and what personal identity is all about and should be, I think the idea of ambition is understood differently, not only cross-culturally, but probably even within our culture in many respects, right? So, you call somebody an ambitious young man in many non-Western cultures, right? Or an ambitious young woman, right? That's an insult. Whereas, right, in our culture, calling somebody an ambitious young man or woman is obviously considered a compliment. So, I mean, I think that in itself is something that's interesting to consider, right? Alicia obviously um, has a what might be a more non-Western conception of of ambition, because as you point out, Herb, she's talking about ambition to accomplish things in terms of other ambition to help other people realize their wants and needs and things like that. So, whereas in the West, traditionally, especially the modern West, the idea when we think of ambition, we think of personal ambition, right? Self-interest and that kind of thing. But maybe it's pertinent that it's Alicia giving that definition of ambition as opposed to the traditional one, because she is also a young woman. And as psychologists, sort of beginning with Carol Gilligan's famous book, In a Different Voice, have pointed out, especially feminist psychologists, the idea of ambition being all about personal aggrandizement and personal achievement and making your mark in the world, so to speak, right? It's always traditionally been a very masculine thing in our culture, right? It comes from men, particularly certain class of men who have power and have the voice to talk about this, for whom ambition is all about self, about aggrandizing their egos or accumulating things for themselves in some ways. And Alicia not being a man and being a woman, right, as Carol Gilligan points out in her book, might have a different version of what ambition is supposed to be all about. Because again, women have much more, again, traditionally in American Western culture, have had a much less ego-centered version of their relationship with the world. So I don't know. What do you think?
I concur
Yeah.
with that, because when I was looking around me to see like for my peers and stuff,
Yeah.
um, I found they were very similar, but also a lot of my peers are women as well. My sister
Yeah.
has a similar ambition. It was about, creating a safe place for the people that they love, essentially.
Yeah.
And that does seem to be a reflection that I see.
Mhm. Seems that. What do you think, Herb? I mean, I get that critique of our culture. No.
Sure. And, one of the things that you talk about the male versus female,
Yeah.
for many females, their ambition is to have children and raise children, and that's that selfless act, right?
Yeah.
Of raising a child or children.
Yeah.
So that's an ambition in itself.
Mm.
Often we don't in our society, we don't tend to look at that really as ambition, right? We look at trying to
Exactly.
climb the corporate ladder, trying to get a better job, trying to make as much money, trying to conquer the world, right? That's kind of that's that level of ambition. But I think as the world starts to change and we're seeing what really matters in life, I think that there's a generation, and Alicia's generation is looking at some of the intrinsic value of ambition. What's a good feeling for me versus the extrinsic value of what am I going to get from my ambition? How much money am I going to get from my ambition? What kind of accolades am I going to get from my ambition? Versus how do I feel? And teachers, nurses, and even some people in other areas of vocations get a certain level of pride where they're not necessarily earning so much more money, but they do get that sense of pride. And I'm wondering if a lot of Gen Zs are feeling that, that is so hard, or it's so difficult, or I don't see the value ultimately that I'll get. What I find is I find more value in a good feeling of giving to others, how to create something, being more even entrepreneurial, that obviously might cause some more risk, but still gets a greater sense of gratification than doing something or working for somebody else. am I getting, is that close to
I
what you're
think
talking
you hit
about?
it on the nail. I think you hit on the nail because when I was writing down, I was like, what are some kind of ambitions that I would think other people would have? And I came up with very traditional ideas of ambition, the career path, I want this specific job, I want this specific position. I came up with family, maybe like the American dream kind of aspect of owning a home, your own little place. Um, but those didn't, the home kind of in a way, because building a safe place for the people around you that you love, I could understand that. And like I said, I've seen that reflected in my peers. Um, but itself, just trying, I think we've seen too many times people seeking for that traditional path, and there is a lot of work. And I don't think it's the work itself that scares our generation. It's, is that work going to actually come to fruition? But also, I think there's a deeper level of we've seen the impact that individuals can have. And we've been kind of steered away from that kind of individualistic idea, or at least for in my case, to more of the communal aspects of, giving, of connecting with people to build something more fulfilling. Because we've kind of spoke about this in the happiness episode, or some of the social aspects that we talked about, connecting to people and finding actual fulfillment for it instead of things that feel a little bit more traditional, I guess, for ambitions. They don't feel like they're going to reach that fulfillment. At least in my case, I don't see fulfillment in just the job. I want to know what I can do with that job. How am I going to help? How am I going to make the world a better place? Because there's a lot of ways that you can make it not a better place for other people.
Yeah.
What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, well, it brought something to mind, as it always does, Alicia, when you issue your insightful observations. But there was a TED talk, and this just came to mind, so I can't really give a reference. I think the title, if anybody's interested, who's listening to this, or you guys, is a TED talk. Um, entitled "Money Really Does Make You Happy," something like that, right?
Oh,
So again, in terms of this connection between ambition and happiness, they did this, and again, I don't. You can look it up, watch the TED Talk. I don't know who it was and where they did it, but they did this empirical study of how, and again, it was a small study involving a particular kind of transaction, but they were looking into whether if you give people small amounts of money, um, in what ways and to what extent would this make them happy? And what they found was, again, they had different groups and control groups and stuff like that. But the upshot of the study was that when they gave different people a small amount of money, I don't know, it was $50 or $100, something like that, and told you spend it on whatever you want to make you happy. The people who were the most happy, they found with it, and again, this is a small amount, so I don't know about winning the lottery, but with small amounts of money, they found pretty unequivocally that the people who took that money and spent it on somebody else, spent it to help somebody else or give it away or whatever they wanted to do with it, were much happier in the long run by virtue of that gift of money than people who spent that little amount on themselves, right? Buying some trinket that they always wanted, or going out to dinner or something like that. So I guess, I mean, I think it speaks to your point, right? That in some sense, the kind of ambition, and if it's an ambition that's sort of directed toward common good or toward unselfish, unegotistical ends, is a more ultimately productive kind of ambition, maybe for people, than self-centered ambition is, at least in terms of giving you long-term satisfaction. I don't know.
Rich, Scott Galloway, a business owner and successful. He's a professor now. He's written a number of books, and he'll talk about how money does make you happy in the sense of it allows you to make the decisions you want
Mm.
versus if you're struggling. And again, it's not that poor people are all unhappy. There's a lot of people who don't have a lot of means who are happy. There's no doubt about that. But what money does is it it puts on the table the ability, as you just said, to help other people, to not have to worry about where you're living, whether you're going to have a food insecurity or anything else like that. So there's no doubt. And I think, as we talk about this topic of ambition, we need to recognize that still most people, and especially in the Western environment, Western European, United States, still see Japanese, Australian, still see ambition as creating an environment where you are earning enough so that you do feel secure from it.
Yeah.
And I think what makes some of these topics when we're talking about them, it's not a black and white, left or right. There's all these areas to what justifies a true level of ambition, and I think that we want to be ambitious and we want to achieve certain things, and we certainly want money because we recognize that money helps us live better. But I think as Alisha speaks, what we don't want it to do is we don't want it to take our joy away. We don't want it to take our happiness away. We don't, we want our having our goals and objectives. We want to have our sense of purpose, but we don't want to have that so far away from the daily tasks that we're doing that we're not feeling that. And I think your generation, Alisha, is trying to figure out how can I still find joy, happiness, sense of purpose in what I'm doing and be ambitious in that, but then also make money, because we truly have to make a certain amount to secure ourselves.
No, I completely agree, because that kind of came up as the aspect is money is really important to build that safe place, to build, that community. You need resources. So that was an interesting aspect of it. It's just something I didn't want to wholly focus on. Um, and I think that that can sometimes be reflected, because I think it is ambition does usually cause, or ambition usually goes towards trying to find financial stability, because financial stability is so amazing for your mental health.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things that Viktor Frankl mentioned is, living purpose with meaning. And isn't that a lot of what ambition really is? It's the ambitious person who sees something that they want to achieve, that they want to do. Um, and they believe, whether it's building something, whether it's product development or a service, or a nonprofit, whatever it might be, it's purpose driven, right? And sometimes they never achieve it, or sometimes they start a business or they design something, but it never comes out. But they've had the ambition to do that, and that's the risk taking, that's the entrepreneurial thought, right? Is that part of this philosophical way of understanding why we exist?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. You think, Alicia? I think that that's certainly. I mean, there's the interesting question of, again, we're talking about the way our ambitions are directed, or the goals that our ambition are directed toward making a big difference. But there is the deeper critique that comes again cross-culturally very much, and to some extent, again, this has changed in our culture. As a matter of fact, just again, in case anybody listening is interested in literature, I have it right on my table because I'm doing another research project right now, and it's called it's a history of ambition. And even in our culture, we've had and a very ambivalent relationship with the whole nature of ambition throughout the history of our sort of Western culture. If you look back far enough, ambition itself was regarded with caution. If you look at the pre-modern era, when you had sort of the philosophies of virtue from the ancient Greeks, and certainly from our religious traditions, ambition had this very sort of taint of pride and arrogance and, personal will dominating other people about it, so that in ancient times, ambition itself was kind of discouraged. And I guess maybe that was more suitable for a culture where everybody sort of grows up and does whatever their parents do, and life goes in these cycles where nobody expects to, what we in the West would call, improving our lot in life, right? Because the modern Western commercial culture has done a lot to infuse people with the notion that ambition itself is a great thing, because that is what our economy and our social life is built on, right? People want a social climb, they want to have more material things, and they want to make more money, and they want to have more prestige. And that has been given a very, very strong sanction in the positive sense in our society. But other societies, again, as I said, don't have that kind of attitude toward as much. They don't have as a strong endorsement of ambition itself, I think, as we do and we have. And there is a sense, I think, that we should consider in which desire or ambition, if you want to call it that, if your life is ruled by it, can be a source of unhappiness. One more thing, and then I'll shut up. Again, I have all these things on. I think there's a great poem. I won't bore you. It's a one-verse poem, but it's a really good one by Stephen Crane, who's a very famous American poet. And here it is. It's one verse. It's called "There was set before me a mighty hill." And he wrote, "There was set before me a mighty hill, and long days I climbed through regions of snow. When I had before me the summit view, it seemed that my labors had been to see beautiful gardens lying at impossible distances." And I think that is a great poem. It's kind of like a Zen koan, right? Because it's a sort of a cautionary illustration of what can happen with a life that is ruled by ambition, right? Because your life is ruled by ambition. In a sense, you're always going to be living for the next thing, next moment, the next achievement, and you'll never be happy, right? You're always going to, as soon as you attain what you want, that's just going to be a gateway to looking at all the things you don't have. So yeah, go ahead.
I think that is key in the younger perspective. Like I was saying, is those traditional ideas of ambition is it's something in the future, something there. We're not given, especially from my generation's perspective, a solid idea of what the future is going to look like. There doesn't seem to be as much, which that's true of all generations. There's always that forward non-stability, but I think key in shaping our perspective is you're constantly looking ahead to, because one of the things that I was told as a kid, and it shaped the way that my work ethic was for my grandparents, is work now, do all of the hard stuff now, and you can take your break when you're my age. So you don't have to be like me continuing working. And I took that to heart. However, we've seen time and time again how that's not the reality of things. The changing of the way that jobs have been, the benefits and things that jobs provided for people, it's just not there. Those traditional routes of looking for ambition, it seems like it's constantly looking to a future that honestly we don't know if it's even going to exist.
Alicia, you're spot on. The whole idea is I think when Rich and I were growing up, we never had to worry about this, or we didn't think about it. We didn't think about, really, I don't think anyway, maybe some people did, but I didn't think so much about ambition for ambition's sake. I thought about, I got to work hard. I got to study. I got to get a good job so that I can afford to live, whatever it might be. And I never worried about whether or not, I'd have to worry about, finances and all, as long as I did what I needed to do. But your generation, there's no doubt that the modern environment has made it more difficult for you. And so I've just spent the better part of 4.5 weeks. I'm in my 5th week in Europe, and certainly Western Europe. And now I'm in Helsinki, Finland. And I think there's a lot of people who strive for the simple life. And the simple life is where, how can I live a life where I meet my basic needs? Okay. And I get my 5 and 6 weeks off paid for my vacation. I don't need to be working so hard that I have multiple cars, larger homes, and all these other things, because if I'm doing that, then it's taking away from my freedom of spending time with my friends and my family, and doing the things that I want to do. And so I truly am finding, and again, every time I come to Europe, I notice it more and more. And there's no doubt about it, in the younger generation, they're embracing it even more than our generation did when we were younger. And what's going to be interesting is to try to understand how that how this thought of what ambition is will change how we live and interact with each other.
Hey, just again to interject really quickly with another reference, another source that I can't reference because I just thought of it. But again, I'm sure there have been a lot of these, and probably Herb, you can reference a lot of them yourself because you studied this stuff. But I read about a cross-cultural psychology study that involved where you're at, Finland. And what they were looking at was the difference in the way people from Finland will talk about their ambitions in life versus in America. And again, as I don't need to tell you guys, right? You can imagine the big difference is people in America are just talk themselves up and talk their ambitions up all day, every day. They're all Donald Trump, right? Everything's great and everybody's a winner. And I'm gonna rule the world. I'm gonna be president of the United States someday. I'm gonna have the corner office at the top of the building and be the CEO of the company. That's the way Americans talk, and that's the kind of optimism that fuels our ambitions. But as opposed to Finland, interestingly, and this is the place, the society that this study focused on, where it is not customary for people, again, to talk that way. Parading your ambitions, flaunting your ambitions in public is considered rude, and people aren't encouraged to have these huge ambitions. People are encouraged to not, and if they are, not to articulate it, right? Because the upshot of this study was that they compared the two, and they said, well, gosh, people in America, then, if they're having this optimistic attitude about their lives and potentials, must be a lot happier than people in Finland, which of course is not the case, right? The Finns are literally the happiest, statistically, the happiest people in the world. And yet they're the most modest and unwilling to talk immodestly about their ambitions the way we are. And what they concluded from this particular study, what the people who did it concluded, was that it is their very lack of optimism and lack of ambition that makes them happier ultimately than we are in the United States, precisely because we know, everybody should know, you're not going to be president of the United States. You're not going to have the corner office and be CEO. You're not going to be Bill Gates or Donald Trump even, right? It's just 99.999% of us aren't. And if we sanction that kind of ambition for in our popular culture, you're going to have tons of people who are always disappointed in their own are always disappointing their own expectations. Where in Finland, where people don't dare have such expectations, they're happy with what they get. And I don't know. I think I just brought that fact to mind with me. And I don't know if there's a lesson in that for people in your generation, Alisha, or not. But and maybe it's not even, I don't know, maybe that kind of happiness, the kind of happiness the Finns have attained, is not the greatest thing in the world anyway. Maybe Americans, even though we're less happy, we're more productive people. Our GDP is higher than Finland's is ever going to be, right? And all that kind of stuff. I don't know. What do
I
you guys
think
think?
I think it reflects kind of or it could be the younger generation, because I see this a lot in articles about the workforce and the changing of the workforce. And I
Yeah,
know a lot that's brought up is work-life balance and
yeah,
avoiding burnout. And I think that contributes a lot. That kind of traditional idea of ambition, it
yeah.
does kind of push you to work, work, work.
Mm,
You have to reach that goal, but that goal is unattainable for a good portion of people.
yeah,
And a lot of times that can be devastating. I can talk back to our self-esteem
yeah,
episode.
yeah,
That could
yeah,
be devastating to your self-esteem if you're aiming for something that's just not attainable.
yeah,
So when you talk to a lot of the Finns and the younger generation, unlike even when I seem to find some of them in my business classes, they're focusing on sociology, psychology, nonprofit, working for the government. Um, they see themselves in a position to be helping people, even in these jobs, even if they're not starting it themselves, but they're working in these what they call over here NGO, non-governmental organizations, um, and because that actually does bring that work-life balance to them, because it's not a corporate environment that every day is constantly looking at the bottom line or the next quarter. What it is, it's an ongoing, established a goal, an objective of providing a better environment for poor people, making sure there's clean water. That's an ongoing thing. That doesn't,
yeah, yeah,
it's not confined to a time frame. That's always going on, right? Working in mental health, whatever that happens
yeah,
to be. And some of them end up in the corporate environment. And
mm,
so they've got this background in social psychology or whatever it might be. But again, now they're still only working 40 hours a week. They still get their 5 or 6 weeks off of vacation. And so they truly look at that work-life balance.
yeah,
And it's not just the North, but I'm finding, when I spend a fair amount of time in the Czech Republic, if I'm spending time with German, my English friends, my French family, this whole concept is part of how they think, and I think that there's no doubt that the U.S. can I'm not necessarily thinking that overnight we're going to get 5 weeks off vacation. That clearly is not going to happen. But can we pull a little bit more from this side that as Rich was saying, why keep going and thinking that you're going to be this multimillionaire or this billionaire, where whereas chances are you may not. But the other side to that is if you don't have that feeling and if you don't strive for that, then you clearly will probably not attain it. So America does pride itself on a strong productivity focused individual, and this is where um, back to this whole balancing act on
mm,
the individual. Now it's a matter of who are you as an individual and where do you live? Alicia, I am sure that there are some young Gen Zs your age who would say, no, I'm going for the money. I'm going to go to Wall Street, and I want to make as much money as possible. I don't care about my time off right now. Right? I mean, there are some people,
Mhm.
but I think if we take your generation as a collective, there's no doubt that I think that more are gravitating towards the way that you're talking.
I think it is reflecting because, like I said, burnout has been something since 2020 that I've been hearing about, and it's spoken or it's brought up a lot more than I'd ever previously. Like, I'm pretty sure if I'd spoken to my grandparents about the idea of being burnt out at work and how is your workplace, trying to help you with that, they would just say, they would probably look at me like I'm insane. Like, what do you mean? I don't feel like going to work. I'm still going to go to work. That's work. That's how it works.
mm,
Um, but I think a lot more people have been thinking about how the effects on your mental health. And it is a balancing act because even the things that you love and you're passionate about, like you said, some of the people working for these non-government agencies or organizations, they're working towards helping people, but that can still be a hard job and you can still burn yourself out trying so hard. I think moving away from this individualistic way of like because that can be a very Western thing, is this like strongman individual culture of like the individual as the one who's going to accomplish the tasks upon them. But it's a collective thing. You're an organization. I think that was one of the great things about taking the organizational management classes is learning how effective people can be when they work together and how complex it is to get people to work together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you guys think? Do you think, Herb, do you think Americans are less happy than Finns or anybody else, any of these other working cultures that you've interacted with a lot in Europe? And Alicia, do you think people in your generation are happier or less happy than people in prior generations? And
Mm.
I bet there are a lot of ways to measure this, right? I mean, I know Finland gets the happiest place on earth rating, but that's on the base of all kinds of statistical data that whoever's doing this study wants to include. There are lots of ways, right, to determine whether groups of people are happier or unhappier. So I don't know. What are your own personal perspectives on that?
So I'm going to have to say that I'm finding that individuals in Europe, for the most part, and I'm interacting with not only people who are working, I'm also interacting with students. And I think they are less stressed. And if you want to make the connection between happy and less stress, um, that's the connection that I'm seeing.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
seeing that because they're less stressed, uh, there's a greater happiness factor. They're able to let their guard down. They're not too worried about losing a job. There's such a strong social network. They're not worried so much about not having any time off and spending time with their children and family and vacationing because they're going to get it. Whereas in the United States, I think there's no doubt that there's a small group of individuals who are quite wealthy who get that. They have that option. They're able to do that. And I believe that we as Americans don't want to feel that we're unhappy. So we convince ourselves
Yeah.
that we are.
Yeah.
And we look at what the things that we have and we say, see, look, those other countries, those individuals don't have that. You see, if they lived here, and they want what we have. And so that's where we justify.
That reminds me of
Um,
our friend from Italy, what you're saying, that, right? Right?
this
I
is
mean, I
true.
guess
This
that's
is true.
essentially, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think this is where that again, there are a lot of people who want to come to the United States because there's opportunity in the United States. There's no doubt about it. But once you
Yeah.
get to the United States, it doesn't come easy. There
Yeah.
there is opportunity, but it doesn't come easy.
Yeah.
And you got to work for it. You got to work hard and you got to work for it.
Yeah.
Alicia, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm
So
wondering,
I think
Alicia,
that
not to interrupt, I'm just
Mhm.
wondering about it, what you think of people. Do you think, and again, this is a really subjective judgment, but do you think people in your generation were happier than people that age, several decades ago? Less, more? I don't know.
So it's hard. I would want to say yes, because in certain aspects we have words to be able to express this.
Mm,
And like I said, while work-life balance was something that my grandparents would have never even thought of,
mm,
that is something brought up. Mental health benefits, that is something that's brought up.
mm.
But I don't think in reality that those things have made a ginormous difference because we're still in that area of like Dr. Ricardo was saying, I don't think we have like any paid time off, like mandatory
Yeah,
in the government. It's
yeah,
just not a thing in the US.
yeah.
So this idea of being given even a break is not seen. And I've seen even studies that have talked about how even the breaks that we're given or the vacation time we are given, a lot of people feel that they can't take that
Can't shut
vacation
off.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they'll end up pushing it off and it's not promoted in the same way. So I think still there needs to be a larger cultural shift before we'd start seeing an actual difference in, I guess, my generation's happiness towards it. But I think we are in a good step or in a good spot because we have access to this information. We're more aware than ever of these differences and, hey, this works for these people. Why aren't we trying it here?
Mm,
So I think that's something that
mm,
hopefully will continue to happen and build. And I think you can see that happiness going up. But I think in the
mm.
state that we are in now, I think it hasn't really had a giant effect.
Good. Can I ask you guys another question? Just conversation raised it for me. Um, do you find personally yourselves that there's a connection between ambition and unhappiness at all? Um, when you self-reflect, do you think that in other words, do you think that sometimes the ambitions you have make you less happy than you would have been had you just been, we all know the people who
Mhm.
they're happy sitting on the couch, whatever, smoking weed, playing video games. I don't know. But are they happier than say we are?
I think that it is in a certain sense because I thought it was interesting you brought up historically ambition is
Yeah.
not seen as this thing that is an idealistic kind of thing to be.
Mm,
And I think that individualism that I'm going to, that I'm going to become the president, I'm going to become the leader, that singularness, I think that's going to lead to unhappiness because for me personally, I feel like happiness is connected to connecting to other people.
yeah.
And when it's just about that singular thing, just yourself, I feel like you're chasing your tail. And then there's
Mm,
also that other side of it, like we said, that it isn't possible for all people. So are you running yourself basically into the ground
yeah.
and for something that's not possible?
You
Same,
know,
Herb.
so
I've known you and your ambitions for many, many years right
yeah,
now. And,
yeah.
and the interesting thing is what you attain or what you don't. You have the true spirit of entrepreneurship, obviously, and adventure. And you don't, you've had plenty of setbacks, some successes. But one thing I've always admired about you is you don't seem, on the whole, to let not attaining your ambitions diminish you. Um, which I think, like Alicia was talking about, I think, that's a big issue. So, and I don't know, am I being unfair about you, or do you think that's
I've
the case?
I've been quite fortunate. And again, kind of going back to this whole idea, whether I was born with some of this, whether I've learned it, there's no doubt all my friends, the friends, every single friend that I've had has helped shape me. My family have helped shape me.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that I do feel like I have ambition. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And there have been goals and objectives that I've not achieved. And so then what do? Then I switch off to something else and I go for that. I learn from some of these. Sometimes I don't learn my lessons. But I think there's a couple of things that that ambition does that I like about ambition. First of all, I love the energy that it creates in me. I have energy because I'm ambitious about something. It creates the energy to want to go ahead and do something. When I have that energy, it designs a level of confidence in me. So then I have confidence because then I can talk about what I want to do. So I have the energy to want to do it. Then I have the confidence to be able to talk about it. My drive as I continue to do it, that even when things don't go where they need where they should be going, I still have that drive. I still want to go ahead and pursue. And it ultimately is a purpose. And I love to be purpose driven. And I think that's where ambition is. And it doesn't matter whether your ambition is to train dogs, whether your ambition is to, you know what, I've got that bicycle in the garage and I'm going to get that out and I'm going to take off the wheels and I'm going to repaint the wheels, put the new tires on there, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to get back onto the bike and I'm going to ride it around. You know what? I want to learn how to play an instrument, and you're going to have that ambition. And you know what? Not always will you continue with it. Not always. You know, you will try. You'll try a new language. You will try a new instrument. You will try something. You might go a couple of months. You might go a couple of years. You might continue it for a long time. But don't worry. I guess this is how I look at it. If you've got an ambition to do something, go ahead and do it. And if you fail, it's okay. And and so but I think what we've try to narrow a little bit is that what we don't want to do is create a sense of ambition that maybe is either not achievable or that we could spend a lifetime chasing and it pulls us away from other areas of our lives, like spending time with friends or family, or doing something good for the community that we wished we hadn't spent so much time doing these other things that
Yeah.
we cannot do.
On the
I
other
think
hand, though, I
it's
guess, oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Alicia.
I think it's interesting that your ambition or the ambitions that you put up were a lot more not simple in a bad way, but like they're more direct, they're easier to accomplish. Um, they're things that you can work towards now, and they're a lot more attainable. And I think that's really interesting. I think it reflects how our ambitions, they have to be, it reminds me of the SMART goals that I was taught when I first started in college, where it's like they're specific, they're measurable, attainable,
Mm.
realistic, like the different types of goals that you can have. And I think that is important for ambition, and also the aspect of growing as a person, because that's something that I do think a lot of people are growing towards, people are moving towards, is this idea of growing and attaining knowledge. So I guess it also depends on what your ambitions are, that they can kind of be a really good thing when it comes to self-development.
Yeah. I
How about
remember
you,
there's
Rich?
yeah, there's this concept in Taoism they call the philosophy of Taoism they call and that, that philosophy incidentally, read Lao Tzu's. I'd encourage everybody. It's a tiny, tiny book written by Lao Tzu. It's an ancient book, supposedly written by him, called Principles of the Middle Way, and it's just verses that are really, really fantastic. And one of the principles in Taoism in this philosophy is called Wu Wei, I believe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it exactly right, but the idea is that approach your ambitions in life and your desires in life like you do when you're playing a game, a good game. You want to win. Winning is the technically the goal of the game, but what makes you enjoy the game is the playing, right? And if
Mhm.
you have, I think the attitude is if you have that attitude toward, I think this is what Herb was talking about and what you're talking about, seems to me. If that's your attitude toward your ambitions in life, that will yield maybe not only the most happiness, but maybe the most productivity, because you won't stress out, you won't burn out, and you'll and whatever you do will be a labor of love, so that the pleasure you derive from it won't be in any particular result. It'll be just traveling the path. So it seems like that's what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the measurable goals kind of thing, it makes you wonder, though, these people like Van Gogh or Napoleon or, sort of the tragic hero types that we all know and love. Jim Morrison and the Doors, I guess. I don't know, whatever. The Kurt Cobain, I don't know, right? The tortured artists and conquerors and leaders, the Gandhis of the world, right? Who, they leave everything behind to do this really impractical thing that nobody thinks they're going to be able to do. And they wind up doing it. doesn't really, and I don't know if it makes them, I guess some of them it made happy, very often it didn't. And then very often the sacrifices that they made for accomplishing those things were way out of proportion in a sense for what they attained, right? If Van Gogh had never, if everybody just looked at Van Gogh's paintings and said, I don't know, that I'm not impressed, and he'd never gotten famous or anything, then never his leaving his family and never doing anything else in life and living like a pauper and then finally killing himself, everybody would have just said he's a loser, not a genius, right? And I guess that's one of the big risks we all take when ambition is about following our bliss, right? And I don't know what the answer to that is, right? Because at some point, beyond whether or not you're going to be successful or your odds of achieving what you want to do out of what you're doing, beyond that, I guess we're just doing it because it's a passion or a calling, right? And when you enter that territory, then all the planning in the world, right, and all the justifications in the world will help, but they're not sufficient to explain why it is you're doing what it is you're doing, right? I don't know.
And Rich, great. I mean, this is it's great to hear you talk about these great people. But as I sit here, I look at another great person right in front of me, and I want to hear about your ambitions and again, here you've just recently you are still teaching a class or whatever, but you've kind of felt like you've kind of moved away from retirement, but you haven't, or moved into retirement, but you haven't because you're writing, you're still doing podcasts with other organizations and your friends and your colleagues and your particular discipline. As you reflect on your ambition over the years, I mean, I look at you and I think personally, a very ambitious person, professor, who wanted always to do a good job, a great job in his classrooms, and again, very scholarly, well-read. That's taken a lot of time. That's taken a lot of time out of your life, right?
Yeah, it has. And I guess for me, I guess that's why I raised that issue. I think the most significant ambitions that I've had have not been ones that I could ever give a sort of a logical explanation for, right? Why did I choose the paths that I did in life and commit myself to them, and some of which were beneficial, but many of which maybe weren't. I can't. It's hard for me to give a justification for any of those things, and I don't know if any of us can. Right? If you think of the commitment to somebody you love, or having kids, or choosing one particular career over another career that might have been more lucrative. Are there any real, ultimately, I guess the existentialists like Kierkegaard, who talked about the leap of faith that you brought up several weeks ago, Alicia, maybe they got a point in saying that ultimately your ambitions in life are just that. They're your leap of faith. They're your, or do you think I'm wrong? I don't know.
No,
I
not at
think
all.
that I think the passion that Dr. Ricardo is bringing up, and like how that for him drives him, I think that it or that's one of the things that he likes about being ambitious, is
Yeah,
that the passion, the attitude that comes with it. I think that there is something to be said about that. It of enjoying and living in that moment that is still there. It's not really just future looking. It's the passion of working towards that thing that you're
yeah,
really into. And especially if it's uh it could be literally anything.
yeah. So if you guys had it to do all over again at this point in your lives, do you regret your ambitions?
Mm, I think I'm still very early in, but
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't think I do.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, the things that I've sought out, the knowledge in particular that I've sought out, and I mean, seeing all of the things that you've referenced and shown me, it does give you a richer understanding of life.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, who knows? Who knows? But it's really
Yeah.
interesting. As I sit here and again, I think absolutely terrific conversation with us and everything else. I also think that there's a group of people out there saying, "Hey, those guys, okay, that's wonderful and everything else, but I'm going for the money. I'm heading to Wall Street. I'm going to be the next president of my country or my corporation. And you have to have people like that. There's no doubt about that. And I teach that, strangely enough. I do teach be driven, be productive, make your organization the best that it can be, regardless of what it is. I don't care if it's school, but make it the best that you can. And if you want to be great, be great. And a great a quote by Zig Ziglar was that you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. So let's all start right now and get going. But great. Another wonderful conversation. Again, as I say, I'm here in this great cafe and art gallery here in Helsinki, and just having a great time with these Finnish people. And I'm going to report onto my team here on how things are going. But hopefully you all enjoyed this conversation. Thank you again, Rich, for being here. Alisha, thank you. And this is just a terrific time. This is our Friday, and it really starts our weekend really, really well. So until next time, have a great week, and see you all next time. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We look forward to next week as we cover another cool and fun topic. This podcast was produced by Three Lions Production and sponsored by Con Consulting and Training. Until next time, keep it between the lines.